You're not accustomed to it, and neither am I. I'd like to bring the Tuesday, January 14th meeting of the Charter Commission to order. And we have a lot of work to do tonight, as we have every night. But I think tonight you really better fasten your seatbelts because there's a lot to get done in a pretty tight timeline, and we're working hard to have that happen. There is one thing I want you to notice, though, on the agenda. There is going to be a very, very, very brief non-public session just before the close of our meeting. And then I've already alerted Matt and Lyndon, and they're going to stand by and close up like they usually do. So we'll have that very short meeting. And it does fulfill the requirements for a non-public hearing. And so I'll assure you I'll do my best to make it right and not screw it up. With that, we've had the call of order, and now I'm looking for the approval of minutes of the June 7th meeting. Are there any errors, omissions, things to call to our attention?
I have a correction, I think.
Okay.
Under Amendment 1, it says, Mr. Glan noted that the only way regulations on campaign finance could be adopted was by referral to RSA 31. I think what I was saying, or meant to say, was that the state takes the position that the only way regulations on campaign finance can be adopted is through RSA 31.
Okay, has one of you two ladies got that?
I have it.
Okay. Are there any other things to bring to our concern? If not, I await a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Guess not. Then those who are in favor of approving the minutes for the June 7th meeting will say aye, please.
Aye.
Are there any abstentions? Oh, yes. We missed you, dear.
Well, thanks. I missed all of you.
Okay, there is an abstention because Tom was absent. His first absence, I noted. I always take attendance. And, no, I don't, because I'd have to mark myself down, too. Any nays? There are none. Then we will say that the approval of the minutes has taken place, and we are all set to move on. Now, who's going to bring the bad news about our discussion of the meeting with the state officials?
Well, I could report on that, if that's okay.
Please do.
We had gotten a great response from the Attorney General's office and the Secretary of State's office to schedule a meeting for today, this morning. But as we got to this morning, the state team suffered 2 cases of COVID.
Oh.
And so we have canceled that meeting for now. We were hoping to have the meeting before we had our meeting here, but I think the state is, pretty much aware of how we feel as a commission. We can talk more about it tonight, but we can clearly just go ahead tonight. It would have been nice to have that meeting and explain to them why we have the concerns that we do with respect to their objection to a local government entity like the Concord School District promulgating rules that govern campaign finance reporting and transparent and fair elections. But we can talk about that ourselves as we move on to the final report. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay. Discussion of the final report in the ballot language. You folks have had one tome here and one a little lighter. And if everyone has them, let's have them at the ready. If you don't have them, give a holler. All right. I'm looking at you, Bill, again. Jim.
I'll start it, but
Okay.
Jim did the laboring more here. I did some formatting. So you have 2 documents. One is of the smaller document. This document shows changes that we are now proposing to make to the charter as a whole as a result of the state objections. So this is taking what we had approved in the preliminary report as our charter, comparing it to a revised charter that takes into account the objections of the state as we discussed last meeting, And Jim did the laboring oar on this, and I would ask that you let Jim describe this as we walk through it.
We're happy to do that. Sir?
Okay. Hi, good to see everybody. Jim O'Shaughnessy, attorney for the commission from the Drummond Woodson Law Firm. Good to see everybody again.
Was that a little piece of advertising?
No, that was very mild compared. I can do more. School lawyer extraordinaire, just kidding. We've seen this document so many times already. So this really is, I just want to point you to the redlining where we even looked at a version of this last week, but it hadn't been presented in a way that was easy to follow. So right at the bottom of the first page, here the language says the school district clerk and treasurer shall be selected in accordance with state law. The word selected rather than elected, and I didn't use the word appoint, selected in accordance with state law. And Bill,
No, I was just gonna ask a question, which is, so we got a document this afternoon, which was the red line version of this document, and now we've got another version, which is some additional redlining, which looks like it's very, very minor. Is that the proper way to put it?
Yeah, the one that you got earlier was an earlier draft. This is really the working document. It is showing the changes to our preliminary report document.
This is the McCoy.
Well,
This-
all right, let me just, if you look at, okay. So you had in the version you sent around earlier, had yellow highlighting to show.
Yes.
So the yellow highlighting was not an entire change? It was only, because if I look at this version, there's only some minor changes within that yellow highlighting.
That's exactly right. It's that, I think that's, Jim, you had, in the draft you had prepared, there was some yellow highlighting.
Yep.
But I reformatted to have it be precise, so that it's an actual word by word, the differences.
It's just easier to see some of the changes that we made as a result of
The state.
state's objections or proposals in the earlier version, but
This is the official version, because it's more precise,
Okay, and may I make a comment?
for the
please?
record.
Instead of talking in terms of color, could you talk in terms of where the location
Yeah.
is on the page and the...
sure, at the bottom of the first page,
Thank you.
that's the first big change. The school district clerk and treasurer shall be selected in accordance with state law. So that's the big change. That's the result of the objections from the state. And that is also a bit different from the version last week. And I just want to point out the use of the word in accordance with state law is, I think, I'm being intentionally precise but a little bit open and in respect to like what does in accordance with state law mean. I'll explain a little bit more of that later, but I just didn't want to say in accordance with RSA or anything that specific, because state law could also be common law. And I think there's a door that I'd like to leave open for the future. So rather than close that door here, it's wide open. It says in accordance with state law, and we know right now what the process is and what at least the Attorney General has said, and so I think that process will continue to be the process until there's some change in how that law is interpreted. So the next change, if you turn the page, is really it's at the bottom of the page under Section 5, Qualifications and Reporting. This was that long debated, often revised, probably again by Bill. I mean, we've rewritten it so many times, but this is the language that pertains to filling appointments and what we do here. So we talked about this last week. Whenever a district or school voting zone board member ceases to maintain a domicile in the district or school voting zone or otherwise resigns from office, that way it's just clear, right? The board shall declare the office of such person vacant and shall appoint a qualified person from that district or school voting zone, as the case may be, to serve for the remainder of the calendar year when the voters shall elect a qualified replacement to serve for the balance of the unexpired term beginning in January.
so I have a question.
And that's the old,
Oh.
when the moving van leaves the yard, then that person has ceased to be a member of the
Yeah.
Concord School Board.
They're not qualified anymore if they leave the area that elected them.
Right.
So the language is not completely precise because it doesn't address the question of when the person is in the third year of their term. So we say you're going to appoint someone for either the
Rest of the term.
No, the rest of the year.
to serve the balance of the unexpired term beginning in January, or the new term, a new term, as the case may be, right? Because if I move out of the district in June and my term out of the zone in June and my term otherwise would have expired in January, a new person gets appointed. And do they not, they get appointed right away,
Right,
not in January.
correct.
So
And then they serve till
it's just,
January.
we're talking about unexpired terms, but the term may have expired at the end of the year. See what I'm saying?
Well, so then the voters would elect anyone new anyway. 'cause
Anyway.
The term's
Yeah.
expiring.
Well,
You don't have to address that.
for the balance of the unexpired term or for a new term.
You don't have to
Well,
say,
you're not-
you don't have to address that. So there isn't an unexpired term if the term expired. So that term ends if it's the end of a third year. That appointment automatically expires and you have a new election for a new 3-year term. It does not, this really just addresses what happens for
It picks it
appointment.
up in an indirect way. Okay.
Yeah, this just is a gap filler for what happens with appointments and how long those appointments serve. That's really what that addresses. So again, process-wise, people will have a chance tonight, and we're not signing until next week. Something we have to hear back from the AG's office, and now that might actually, timing-wise, might be a little tricky for them.
Yeah.
But we have to hear back from them, and they don't have this yet. We're waiting till we met tonight to go through it. I get the green light, and then I share it.
Well, no, we've got a minor complication with availability at this site, don't we?
This room is not available next Tuesday night.
Yeah, it's not gonna be, this place is not available to us next week, Tuesday night.
Okay.
But we
There
could
are
find an alternative location, right?
Yeah, right, or if all
Not
we're
that
doing
can
is
be,
showing up to
not that can
sign.
be broadcast.
Right. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, no, I just wanted you to know that, and all of us to know it. What's it, a public hearing?
No, it's just a board, it's just a
No,
meeting.
no, I mean the school board,
Oh.
yeah.
It's a school
Yeah.
board meeting, and then there's a committee meeting on
Got it.
Wednesday. There's something on Monday night. Well, actually, we could do it Monday, I think, at like 6 o'clock. There's a meeting prior to that, but this should be open at 6 o'clock.
Well, we'll
Yeah.
we'll solve it.
We'll tackle process after,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to
Yeah,
remind
let's get
you so that when you're looking at this now, you're wondering whether this is the last chance to say something. It's not. We want everybody to have a chance, just like last time, to review and send me your feedback. Yeah, because I want a bunch of eyes on this. So moving on to the next section, we really get to kind of move through the whole thing, because the only other section that was tweaked
Well,
was.
Jim, you might want to look on page 3, the second paragraph after the carryover.
Oh, well, yeah.
That-
So, it's funny. You're showing the strike, so at the top of page 3, second paragraph, we are showing a strike through of the campaign finance reporting language, which really won't be shown in the compare of last charter and new charter, because that's language that was just ours so it's becoming kind of confusing, but now you can see it, that it's been stricken or struck out, crossed off, and it will not appear on the charter. It won't appear either in the compare document that will be an appendix, because it's new language that we had to abandon. Okay.
This is the issue that I guess was the most important one that we talked about last week after the response we got from the state. with Tom there, we talked about last week that the state objected to our proposal to require the school board, by the charter, to require the school board to adopt rules requiring school board candidates and charter commission candidates to file reports of their campaign receipts and campaign expenditures, a kind of transparency in elections.
Sure.
And the point was made that school board elections in Concord and in New Hampshire, and probably across the country, are the most important local elections today. They're more controversial. Partisanship has seeped into those elections, whereas for a long time the history was that people were dedicated to just serving the best interests of the children. And so it was a unanimous decision of this board to expand the campaign finance requirements. The state, in their response, objected, saying that unlike towns or cities, where there's a specific statute that says that the local government body has the power to write such campaign regulatory rules, there's no similar power for school districts. Now, we all know that Concord School District is the most unique school district in the state. We're not contiguous with the city of Concord. We have for almost 100 years operated as an autonomous governing body where the school board is both the legislative body and the governing body. And unlike a town where you have an annual meeting that is the legislative body, and then you have officers who carry out the governing through the year. That argument that we made in favor of the policy of campaign finance reporting, which we believe, when we talk, that the citizens of Concord would widely support, that provision was opposed. Therefore, what you see is, while we proposed it in our preliminary report, it's stricken in this proposed final report. At the meeting last week, at the motion of Clint Cogswell, we considered the question whether this commission, as a body, should recommend to the school board policy committee that they take this up themselves and that they consider promulgating policy rules on their own, even if the charter might not require it. That may put the school board itself at odds with a state position. But ultimately, and this is my last statement on this one, and I think it's important for the record, ultimately, I feel certain that the Secretary of State and the Attorney General of New Hampshire do not oppose the policy that we advocated. They have taken a position that is legally, in my view, legally questionable, but I understand the position, and I hope ultimately that the school board can take this on and promulgate regulations to protect these elections from uncertain financing sources and the kind of divisive partisanship that has plagued other districts and luckily not so much ours. That's, thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to summarize that for the record.
And I thank you too. I'm sorry I missed that discussion. I would have had some table banging, I think that.
That's okay.
We have gone on to deaf ears, but nonetheless, it's something that I think we all, I won't speak for everyone, but I think we all feel
Well, I think
very
we also,
strongly about it.
we also know the members of our state delegation well enough that we should sat across the table with Becky Whitley today, and we should start talking about this.
Agreed.
So let me just take it a step further. So to what end, Bill? I mean, where?
To pass legislation that would allow this school district to do this. As Tracy pointed out last week, the problem with a resolution from the school board is any future school board can just undo that resolution if they choose. So
Yeah.
the state's position in a nutshell is it isn't covered. In essence, it's that school board powers are somehow subsumed within RSA 31, and if you don't have that power within RSA 31, you don't have it anywhere else. If you don't, you need legislation to adopt it.
It's a fight worth fighting.
I agree. I'd be happy to join that.
And one of the things we hoped with the meeting today was that we would have, that the Attorney General and Secretary of State would have said that we wouldn't oppose this, or we might
Right.
inactively support it.
Right.
If it were.
So why did they initially not give us support? I mean, I hate to rehash
It's
everything
okay.
you
No,
guys.
just for the reasons we've discussed, which is their view is there are certain powers granted to school boards within RSA 31 that are add-ons to town powers. There's no, what they would say is there's no general statute pertaining to school boards that gives school boards the implicit or explicit power to do this. It isn't expressly addressed in RSA 31, and since it isn't, it doesn't exist within that statute. So it isn't necessarily, there's nothing in the state's position that says it can't be done, although they're close to that.
Yeah.
Because what essentially they're saying is, if it isn't within the general school board power in RSA 194 and it's not in RSA 31, then you don't have the power to do it. So it leaves all school boards, I think, where this has not been adopted. The towns, now in cities, where the cities control the election for the school board, like Nashua, Tracy did some great research on this, Manchester and Nashua, they have the authority to set school board regulations in the election, so they can do it directly that way. But we can't do that in Concord because the city council doesn't have any control over our election.
Sure.
Right.
That was a good recap, thank you.
Thank you.
The problem with their position is that there's a list of things that towns can do, for example,
Right.
but they don't list everything. And so the Supreme Court has construed the powers granted to the towns to govern themselves to include not just the express things, but also implied things. So this had come up in a recent, very, very notable case involving behavior on a beach in Laconia. And the town had passed an ordinance preventing the behavior, and the people, the defendant, the person and her supporters said, you don't have authority to promulgate that prohibiting reg. And the court said, while there's nothing express about this particular issue, we can imply it based on some of the general language. And I think it would have been an easy conclusion for them to say on something as important as campaign finance issues and transparent elections, to say that. They didn't. I'll just note, just with a smile for the members here who have served on the school board, I mentioned this to my wife, who was a school board member for a long time. One of the things that RSA 31 that Bill mentions expressly authorizes towns to do is regulate the conduct of public dances. Well, I can tell you there's no express authority for school districts to do that, yet our school district and school board has had opportunities to regulate dances before. So I think that we have more power than the state position is giving to us. Nonetheless, we have to move on and get
Can I
this
ask
thing.
just one question? So this opinion from the Attorney General, Secretary of State's office really truly only affects us, town-based school boards and places like MV that are cooperative multiple towns. It wouldn't affect any city-based school board?
It might not affect city-based school boards, but it does arguably affect town-based school boards.
I think there was an exception to cooperative ones mentioned somewhere in there.
So, and Tracy, just because I used to be in that office, it's not an opinion of the Attorney General's office, it's simply an expression. The opinion of the Attorney General's office implies something pretty specific. This is just their statement that they will not allow And Tom, what we discussed last week, is it worth going to court to fight this? And
Sign a
my
no.
reaction to that was it's expensive, and unless you have a pretty good idea that the game is worth the candle, there isn't much sense in doing it. It's probably the legislative approach is the better one.
Just to piggyback off of all of that, and I agree that there's the door that I want to leave open a crack is the possibility that another school district that's not in a city, that isn't expressly authorized, may choose to take this issue on, and there may be a court decision down the road that says districts have the authority. So rather than tie the contingency in here on legislative action, I just thought I would tie it to a change in state law, because a court interpreting school districts is going to have the same power as it being passed by the legislature. So there's a couple spots in here where I want to soften the language. I picked up in the ballot question as well, another one, just so that door is open.
Does it feel good to be the instigator?
Because these are fun issues, right? This is how things get done in the state. You know, we start a conversation and it gets passed along. So, back to
Yeah.
Section 18 is the only other section.
yeah, section 18, which you just turn to the last page, I believe, and you'll see, well, page 5. Starts at the bottom. We have that section 1 is still there. Turn to the next page, section 2. There was an objection from the state, so that's been crossed out, and section 3 is still there. So that's the only other. So now you can
Because of
visualize.
that objection, by striking it out, we've essentially conformed, otherwise RSA 49B has that language in it, so we don't need it, correct?
Yeah, so I actually think this is helpful too, because tomorrow morning I'm going to send the redlined charter, the clean charter, and this version showing the changes
Correct.
as a result of to our friends over at the state to say, hey, I need a quick thumbs up from you because we're signing next week. And we're ready to go. So that'll help, I think, streamline the process. So moving now into the large, we're gonna go word for word. I hope you guys had some coffee. Bill,
Nothing new in this other than
there's a lot. I mean, I took some liberties in here too that I just wanted to point out. I don't know, Bill, if you read some of.
I read it all, and
Okay.
I thought it was very, very good.
Okay, so it's basically, it looks a lot like the preliminary report, but there are also some differences. The executive summary is still an executive summary. It's
And just to get this straight, we did a preliminary report, which had the report and then some appendices. This is the exact same thing, except now this will be the final
Final
report.
report, yeah.
And so this is what it would look like as you read through it at
just
home.
before we get to the question, where are the changes in the final report? I mean, we know the appendices that have redlining and like in them are changed. But in the actual final report,
I rewrote like
Yep,
most of
parts
it. So it's all, and I'll try to point it out quickly.
Yes.
But it's been rewritten because it's not, we're further along in the process, and I wanted to, so I'll just walk through it. So the summary is all 5 amendments. I'll just point out that it says November 8th, 2022 as the election day, but I believe it's November 2nd, and I don't know why I put that in there. I think I was referring to the wrong date, so I've already marked that as needed to be changed.
It's the second Tuesday after the first Monday.
Yeah, we've looked it up, and then I looked in my notes,
Yeah.
so I, what is the right date?
It is the
It is the 8th.
Okay,
Okay, good, moving on.
that's one of those details that if you don't get it right, so, number 1 through 5,
We were elected in November of 2021, right? Tuesday, November 2021, the first Tuesday after the first Monday, November
Oh, sure.
1st was the first Monday, November 2nd is Tuesday, the first Tuesday. And then there's the 8th, which is a Monday, and the 9th, a Tuesday. That's November of 2021, which I think is our election month.
But
It's 2022.
22, I don't
Question
understand.
is, when is this
Yeah.
upcoming election?
On what day will we
Oh,
vote?
sorry, I thought they were talking about the history. I apologize for that, I was off kilter.
Yeah.
So that
Get
is,
with it.
that is November 8th.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Okay. Just want to be sure.
Apologize for that.
It's worth double checking.
I've got a date somewhere too.
All right, so the rewrite of the summary amendments it's a good thing to have. I mean, honestly, in some ways, we could get rid of the executive summary, but I think it's a good sort of cover sheet, and it's another less formal way to articulate the amendments for people who don't want to dig in or want a different take on them. So those have been reworked to be consistent with the actual amendments. Overview of the final report, which explains what the final report contains. And so then, legal authority, if you turn to page 1 of the actual final report, legal authority is the same. Part B, election results is the same. Part C, overview of proceedings was updated to reflect meetings in May and June. Then there's just the dialogue. I cut it back and was really just summarized it, made references to the more extensive descriptions in the preliminary report. Made some more sort of thanks to the folks who have attended the meetings and offered testimony. And then part D on page 2 explains sort of the timeline from the preliminary report to the final report with just the dates, including on June 3rd, 2022, the 45th day after receiving the preliminary report, the state's deadline. The reviewing state agencies sent their objections to certain proposed amendments of the Charter Commission. Specifically, the state agencies objected to the following. And then I just listed what the objections were with a little editorializing, not terribly editorializing, but a little bit of editorializing. So I think it's just good to show what the objections were based on, but the intent and purpose of the amendments was a really good intent and purpose.
Jim, in item 3, page 3, an amendment that would require the school board to appoint the treasurer and clerk. Should that word be required or allowed?
Well, it would have been required because you wouldn't have had a choice if it was required.
In the charter.
Yeah, the charter says how you do it, so we could change it to permit it.
Wanted to be, sir.
So I say, but the state agencies relying on a narrow interpretation of RSA 6716 again rejected this language in favor of urging the district to pursue legislative action to specifically authorize the appointment of these two positions. So, I mean, we could play around with that forever, but I really think that's an accurate, if not somewhat colored, summary of their objection. Summarizing the public hearing process, and then the Charter Commission must submit its final report by June 22nd. A minor report, if any, must also be filed at the same time. Okay, so that's a summary of the process, and here's a process, and the process following the filing of the final report is Part E, and that really lays out, it's a little bit of a hybrid of both the charter and what 49B requires, but I think it's just good to have that all written down. That way we have it as a reference and the public has it as a reference as well. That's mostly just statutory. Section 2, which starts on page 4, it's really a combination of what we had been doing up until that time, which is just stating the amendment in our explanation, and turned that into ballot questions. And Lyndon was able to dig up ballot questions from the last charter amendment adoption process, so I could look at them and see what they looked like, and this is basically what they looked like. Things can be tweaked and formatting and moved around and so forth. But this is how it was worded. Question 1, this is the statutory language. It could say, shall the district approve the charter amendment proposed by the School District Charter Commission, reprinted below. We could literally reprint it, but that's not going to work. And I don't think we should do a mix of some summarized and some printed, because that's just going to confuse people. But that's how the question was. In the statutory language, it doesn't say, it says, shall the school district approve the charter amendments summarized below? I think that it's important here to say proposed by the school district charter commission, and that phrase was in the ballot question in 2011 or 12, whatever year it was. I'm losing track of time at this point.
So I haven't missed an election, so I'm sure I voted, but I don't remember this, the language, the last time this was done. The description or the summary, they were this long?
Yeah, some of them are longer, in fact.
Yes.
Much longer, full
I'm
pages.
thinking of voters in their voting booths, if anybody's going to read this stuff. So it's reassuring if in fact that's the way it was last time.
Yeah,
I just have no recollection.
Some of them were longer. Some of them were verbose in terms of
Okay.
like they were a little more casual. Not terribly, but a little more casual. We've been through these so many times, and so let me just say the one that sort of got longer was Amendment 2.
Yeah, that's the one I
pertaining
was
to
thinking of.
elections, but it got longer because I really tried to break all the things into
Yeah.
separate parts and just lay it out rather than a long run-on sentence. But it's open to
But let me
modification.
interject. I've already talked to the superintendent about taking this particular part that people will be presented with as part of the voting process and distribute those well ahead of time.
Yeah, right.
Send them home with the kids, put them in different places, at Havenwood, Heritage Heights, and make sure that people have had a chance to read this beforehand, so hopefully when they go in, they're all set. Because they've already
Right.
read it in the privacy of their home
Yeah.
and had a chance to think about it. So that's a key piece, and they're willing to help.
These are fine, Jim, I think, and I think the descriptions are, I have one suggestion later on, I think, because there was one thing that I caught that I think has been fixed. But the only thing that bothers me about this is I'm voting on a charter amendment. I want to see the language that I'm voting on. And I don't know how to address that, whether you have copies of the actual charter available at the polls, in case people want to see it. You know what
I understand, in 2011, the amendment was an adoption of the entire charter. And that was not present, and it was never listed on the ballot. It was expected that, what the process was is that there was a public hearing, people wanted to have the local democratic process take over for what was previously a state legislative process. The Concord Monitor opined, in an editorial in favor of it. The school board was very supportive, and that was enough to get the 80% plus vote for that. And then the second amendment was the amendment on ward voting. And that was not listed as well. So typically, these are not listed by the actual terms that, although.
The charter is short enough now that the Monitor could publish the whole thing.
Yep. Could.
I mean, are we going
On
to publish it on
one
the
page.
district's website?
Pardon?
We'll publish it on the district's website.
They'll have
Oh,
this
sure.
Yeah.
whole report.
Last time there was a voting guide or a voter's guide, it would be appropriate to do a charter, amendment guide, which could have this plus, the
Well, it's not, but it's probably worth it.
I mean, I would, as someone who opens up a kid's backpack every day and dumps things out and reads a quarter of what goes, quickly, relevant, worth my time,
Yeah.
I don't know that, I think digital is the way to go. Just going to throw that out there, that a lot of that stuff, yes, it would be nice to send it home in kids' backpacks, it's not going to get read.
I'll just mention this because it struck me and it's a great point, but it struck me when I was preparing this and particularly when I was doing section E, the process following the final report. I mean, literally what happens is you submit the final report to the school board, you exist for 60 more days to wrap up your affairs, whatever that means, and then it's not your, it's not your baby anymore. It's the school board's. So, and I'm sure they're open to all of the suggestions, but it is the school board's thing, and sorry, Lyndon.
No.
I think we ought to find a way to maybe articulate ideas or recommendations for next steps, but it'll be up to them to put a voter's guide together, and actually it's up to the board to decide what the ballot questions actually are, what font they're in, and all of those things will be up to a body other than us. So I think it's just helpful to know that.
Lyndon.
Oh, Lyndon, I'm sorry.
I agree with Tracy on this. I also want to point out that the district only has the means to distribute to families, and that would be an equity issue, where we don't have the ability to distribute to even all of you who don't have children in the district.
Oh, I understand.
So we would need to, the district, I think, would need to be very careful, and the commission should probably be
There'd
aware that
probably
we
be
need to
a-
be careful about that.
A big discussion about who would get them and how.
Yeah, I can tell you
And
from,
I will have expired from this commission before that time.
I mean, and back to, Bill's point, I think the lawyers in the Concord are gonna wanna see the rules, and they have the ability to go look at.
It's not the rules,
Well,
it's
to
that when I'm
look-
voting on something, I want to see what I'm actually voting on,
And I-
not a description of what I'm.
Right, and I think there's a very small population in Concord who feels
I
that
would
way,
agree.
and those people probably have the best means to look it up online.
That's fine, I mean,
yeah, so for example, when a cooperative district amends their articles of agreement, which are very similar in nature, the amendment and the revised articles of agreement are on file with the clerk. They're just online, but they come to the annual meeting and they vote on a warrant article that's just, shall the voters approve the articles of agreement as amended on file. So it's really, and then there's a discussion, so there can be sort of a conversation. But in an SB2 district, they show up to the ballots and they just vote on the question. I don't know how many have actually looked at the articles of agreement on file with the clerk, but is very small. But I think the answer is it will be available for anybody who wants to see it. I think Concord does a pretty good job of making it clear where on the website those documents are. And there can be other things they do to publish it as well.
so I have a couple of recommended changes.
Okay, that's what I'm here for.
These are really picky and minor. One is, my name is not Wilbur, quote, Bill Glon. It's Wilbur Glon, as much as I try not to use it. So, take that out.
That wasn't even me who did that, by the way.
There's a couple places. And I remind my two sons that they have me to thank for the fact that they're not Wilbur the Fourth. Bill and Kate might want to weigh on this, but I don't need the Esquire after my name and the signature line. We're just members of the commission, so.
I'm fine with that.
The reason I did it, it's really interesting, but when you look at the state commissions from back in the day, they would always do
I think
that.
it's important
It's like a
legal
courtesy, or maybe for the public to know whether there were members on the board who had legal expertise. But I knew someone might object to that, because it feels kind of like smug or something and stuffy.
Why I don't call myself an attorney.
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer. Right.
It's fine.
So the other question I have is this, Betty will correct me on the grammar of this, I'm sure.
Of course.
This is in question 4. In the third line of that, these procedures were based on state statutes that govern. I think that word should be which, but the way to address that is to say state statutes governing, and then you don't get into that battle.
I picked that sentence up as being fuzzy.
Because it's in the passive voice is why it's a problem.
Yeah, I know.
Because it's easy to revise.
I just say governing, I think that.
Bill probably was
Now that-
really good before he got his hands on it. I
That's
know.
because I have a partner who corrects me on which and that all the time.
What is the rule? I gotta go online.
I always think of the rule is that if you could end the sentence, it's a restrictive clause, so if you're describing something specifically. So if you can end the sentence there, then you use which. But otherwise, you're describing something. So that's not very good. But this is a guy who has a coffee cup on his desk that says, "I'm silently correcting your grammar."
Can I make a comment on question 2? That's the longest one, and I think knowing that the majority of voters are not going to read ahead of time, and the majority of voters are going to come in and be perfectly fine to read these, I would like us to consider looking at how it's written in the executive summary under number 2, where it's all in one paragraph. And to me, that is very clear and precise as to what's happening. And I got lost in the words in the proposed ballot question, and I know what's going on.
So that's a great point. And by the way, everybody, like, please feel like super free to critique. I had 2 thoughts that are related to this. I think the issue is you kind of want to be able to pick it up, look at it, and know really quickly what the subject is and what we're asking for. And you kind of have, there's no like title.
Well, that's because it's not written
There's
in the
no
question.
like
It's-
signpost, like, what are we looking at
Yeah.
here? And then you have to read through it to get there. There's no like, so it could start off with a sentence like, this amendment is, something like we have here, this amendment seeks to blah, blah, blah. That way someone reading it who's like, oh, that sounds fine.
I don't need to read the rest
I
of
don't
the
need to
words.
read the
I
rest
just-
of
the
it,
title
or I
is-
know what they're talking about now, and maybe we can shorten it a little
I
bit.
think you could actually take the last 3 sentences out of that, and you wouldn't change as much. For the purposes of a voter, all you're really talking about here is, if you move out of your zone, you're off the board.
Well, that's why I think in the executive summary, that's
It's pretty
so
clear in the
clear.
executive summary, yep.
I mean, it really, you can read that and you get that maybe there's more nuances to it, but like, we're talking about a word change from district to zone, and we're talking about what happens when there's a vacancy, and it's clarifying that. I want to vote for that because I like it's clear.
But Jim, I like your idea of having the first sentence of each of these say,
What it's
Sort
all
of like
about.
the executive summary.
Yeah.
this one is about this, this one is about this.
Yeah, I don't know why, when Bill and I reverted to this format in the explanation, it became sort of more formal because we were thinking about a ballot question. And then we put it down, and I looked at the other ballot questions, and they were less formal, and they were more easy to follow. So I think that's good feedback.
You could even have a sentence like, this amendment addresses the question when someone who lives in a school voting, in a ward now called school voting
Yeah.
room moves out of that zone.
Well, it sort of comes under the title of user-friendly. When I think of things on the computer and the directions
Yeah.
they give, I say, oh my God. But if somebody could just put it in layman's language.
I mean,
So-
people are coming to vote after work with kids in tow or not kids in tow after a long day, trying to squeeze it in another lunch hour. They want it to be quick and clear. Because what we don't want to risk is people not wanting to read it and just voting no because they don't want to read it.
Yeah.
I think it's more likely that they won't vote at all.
Well, there's
Yeah.
that too, but if it's.
And we don't want that either.
But if you're really perverse, you'll write no.
Well,
So I lean towards the summary section because I just think that's clear, that's more clear, the people's language.
I totally agree.
Yeah, definitely.
The hard part is
Right.
this, right?
Doing it.
With the beginning, the summary stuff, like, I feel like I can be a little less thorough there because it's not the ballot question. With the ballot question, I'm just telling you, like, in my mind, I feel like you have to explain all the components so you're really informing. Like, I worry about not informing them of
Yeah.
exactly what. So
Yeah.
for the folks who would say, well, you didn't tell me that was being changed.
I think Tracy's got a great idea here, which is, in every one of these, the first sentence just tells you, what is
Yep.
this about?
I agree, that's a good,
For example, on 5, this amendment deals with the appointment, with the election of the school district clerk and treasurer. And then,
And I'm going to continue to be picky here, because even like, it's, so going back to number 2, we've got, while the remaining 6 members are elected from smaller geographic areas comprised of school district voters residing in groups of city wards. That's a lot of words to say, clumps of words. I mean, there's,
The current charter refers to districts and wards. To clarify that, we're changing that the district means the district, school voting zones means that.
and that's, I think,
Collection
said
of
well
words.
in this summary. It's, so that's just because when you start to read that sentence and you're like, wait, some smaller geographic areas. If I'm a voter trying to read that, maybe some of this belongs for those who want to be pickier and read it, I don't know, ahead of time.
If, to go back to my point a moment ago, if they don't have to have the specific language, then make it really simple.
Yes, and stop sentences when they've already said something, and not put two whole
As
lines
E.B. White would
together.
say, omit needless words.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Keep it short and simple.
Feelings are so hurt now. Now Betty's getting on board. Now you've got her fired up on Grammar Watch, so.
I'm sorry.
Well, I think the longer questions are
I'm
valid for the
really an
website for
economist.
people who want a deeper dive,
Yeah.
but not for a quick, and also remember the ballot is small font.
Well, and to
I think our intent is to have them read it and be like, oh, this sounds good, and then the rest of it's so dense that they're like, oh, I'm not reading that, I'm just gonna vote yes.
Keep it short and simple.
No, I get it. Look, I get it.
It's a balance, it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
balance, and I think the guidance that we're hearing is in just to retouch these
Yeah.
things with a little bit more pop at the first
Yep.
part,
Hmm?
Yeah,
and a little bit less pop in.
as you go on.
And then, and the risk is just not going so far that, this amendment, pay no attention to it, it just does some clarification. You can't say that.
So it's hard to be, when you get less formal, it takes more sentences and it gets longer. When you become more formal, it's too dense and unreadable. So there's a balance there, and
Sure.
we'll just keep finessing it. I know what you're after. I agree with what you're saying.
And I do have a feeling, even though the school board gets to take this over, that they probably don't have the time to fix these questions when it comes to them, so they're gonna take what we've taken and put it on the ballot.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't expect much change at that level.
Can we cut it down?
I can work on it,
I mean, I think
yeah.
my suggestion would be, since drafting by committees is a disaster, that Tracy gives you some suggestions which you can work with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. That's great.
Yeah, can I get a digital version?
Yes.
Because you probably don't want me sending you
No,
a
absolutely.
handwritten version.
We'll circulate.
People have.
My thought was that we would circulate this electronically to everybody, so anybody who doesn't find something they want to mention tonight, or is quietly like Eric like last time marking his document, he'll send me a nice list, an email. Like you'll have the electronic document.
That was pretty subtle, but yeah, sure.
Is there,
If you want to do that, you can.
So I had this great grad professor at one time who used to come to class every week and say, I've just read this book. And every week he would come and say, I've just read this book. And we finally said, how have you read so many books? And he said, well, I read the first couple of paragraphs, and if I get it, I move on. And he truly did that. And I think the lesson here is that if we can write a few sentences at the beginning of these where people can say, okay, I get it, then they can move on. And if they don't get it, and there's a little more there to kind of substantiate, so much the better. Some people like me, I feel like I need to read everything because I'm inquisitive and nosy, but others may feel exactly, like others that just say, hold on, I read the first sentence and I get what they're talking about, I'm gonna go.
I'm good, right.
I had an idea. So just so you know, we are not like we can make this look any way we want. This whole document, very little guidance comes from the state. So one of my ideas is, what if this may be not what you're looking for, but what if the ballot had two separate, this might be a bad idea, it might have two separate sections, and one of them would be a summary, and it would look a lot like what you're talking about, a two-sentence summary like you see here. And then beyond that could be more, getting into the weeds a little bit, like you see in the explanation part. Is that too much?
I don't know that you need to get into the weeds. Getting into the weeds is, well, I'm being very contradictory now, right?
Yes.
You gotta see the actual language.
Yeah.
The trouble with the actual language is then you gotta have the context of the language within
Yeah.
the charter. But
And in a perfect world, we would like it to fit on the one ballot page. so that
It'll be a separate.
it'll be separate, but we don't want it on two separate pages, because people aren't gonna flip to the second page.
And it's really expensive.
So it's keeping it in a way that's very
Let me give
clear,
you-
but
let me-
fits on one
Let me
page.
give you an example. Let's take question 3. For someone to really understand what this amendment is about, you could take the second sentence. And stop it after the word school board members before every 2 years prior to September, blah, blah, blah. That could be the first sentence. The first sentence that's there now could be the second sentence, and I think that's all you have to say. Because the issue here is not when do you establish the salaries for school board members and the like. It's that we're separating the salary of school board members from the city council. If people understand that, they have enough information to vote knowledgeably, I think. I think Mr. Schweiker would have a disagreement with this as to some of the specifics of that. But in terms of what's actually happening, I think that's all you need.
Right, does someone really care when they're gonna set the salaries? They just care that they're setting it, not the city.
So where would you stop it?
I'd stop in
Well-
that second sentence, I would stop it after the words "two school board members" in the third line down. And delete every 2 years prior to September, an odd number of years, and that any change in the amount would take effect in January of the next year.
It honestly just needs to be that one sentence, this amendment.
Well, except you describe what it's about, and then you say the current charter requires that school board members shall be the state amount of city council, and the city council is offered. This changes that. That's all we're really trying to say.
You know, it's interesting that you say that. We're running into this cat chasing tail problem because we're each wondering about a possible reader. When I heard that, Bill, I just thought of a number of readers who would go, they're gonna set their own salaries?
Well-
No. And then what you do is you say, no, wait. They're not setting there's gotta be another election, so there's a cleansing on it. But I hear you, that's too complicated potentially. I mean,
Well, if they're concerned that the school board is going to have the ability to set their salary,
They're
not
gonna
gonna
vote
worry
no
about
anyway.
when it happens, right?
I hear you.
Anyway, look. all
I
we're
do
talking
hear what
about-
you're saying.
All we're talking about is clarity, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's
And you know, look, I could come up with language, everybody around this table can come up with language. I suggest that we deal with the academician here and let her help you.
There's another component to all of this, which is one of the only requirements of the state law, is that somewhere the final report has to have an explanation of what's different. So it doesn't require you to do that in a particular way or in a particular place, but you've got to be able to look at the whole thing and say, this is different than this. So maybe it's not in the ballot question, but maybe it's.
This isn't, as it's currently written, I think if you, well, look, you can go either way. You leave it exactly as it is, I think you're fine. Or you could switch those sentences,
Yeah.
or what you've done actually first is to say, here's how it currently works, here's how we're changing it.
Last time, the Charter Commission didn't write the ballot questions at all. We submitted our report and the school board
Here's a
took
good
care of
idea.
it.
Really?
No, because that Jim
These are-
said that earlier.
So these are
The municipal
effectively-
officers who end up
These
taking
are
it.
effectively suggestions to the
Yeah.
school board.
I called them
Though given
proposed
everything,
ballot questions.
everything that they're going through with rebuild, runlet and all that, they probably don't wanna take this on.
I'm just, I mean,
Legally, they're
it
required.
seems
to.
pretty clear to me that if we do this, they're just going to use these
Most people in the
questions.
world would say, if you want to make something really clear, don't let a bunch of lawyers write it.
That's exactly right.
Is there anything else that we need to address with this?
No, I hear you. That's good feedback. That's really it. There will be an appendix D, which will add. It was in my version, but according to the law, the report has to have a legal opinion in it, which will be even shorter than my prior legal opinion. It's already been written. I just take out the sections of the part
Looks
that
okay to
apparently
me.
that are illegal now, I guess.
Looks okay to me, that's all.
Yeah, it's like, it looks legal. But that'll be an appendix to the final report. That's it.
Do we know whether Kate's gonna be available to sign?
She's out tonight, but I think she's back next
I said,
time.
when
And I've kept her up to date
When do you
while
expect-
she's been away.
do you expect, Jim, that we're gonna have something that we need to sign?
By the end of the week, and then it's,
Good.
we'll be waiting for the state. So I have to send the various versions today and then wait
So
for
we
them to
need
email you
sign
back.
this week, or we need to sign?
I think we should be realistic and think next Monday.
Yeah.
I told the state that Tuesday the latest. We don't have a meeting here. But my question is, do you have to have a meeting here? That's broadcast? I don't.
No.
That's not
No,
required by
Monday,
law.
we could do it Monday, have a meeting Monday, just a common final sign off.
But I guess what we're asking is, do we have to have a meeting, or can we just all?
If we have approved the final report,
We can't approve the final
Until the
report
state does it.
except in a meeting.
yeah, then I think.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, I was suggesting we can do that tonight, but we can't, because we gotta get.
Well, let's clarify. Do we have access to this place on Monday next week?
We've booked it, yes.
At what
What?
time?
We have booked it, yes,
Oh,
from
okay.
6 to 8
And at the same
or
time?
whatever.
6 to 8 minutes, I hope.
6 o'clock to 8 o'clock.
I'm not bringing my portable printer with me.
I just have,
It's Juneteenth.
I mentioned this when we first started the thing. My kids lived in California for a long time, and before every election, they'd do 20 amendments. And every time they'd get a thing in the mail that explained in detail, this is how it's going to read on the ballot, but this is the details. And I think, Lyndon said it just cost too much for us to mail to the whole city. But there's a lot of avenues that we can get, if for school population, we just send it out. On the Concord Monitor, I know that the Patch would do the same thing. And we just kind of think of ways to get, and then just tell people that you can go online and read the ballot questions in a little more detail. But, we're keeping it simple when you walk in to vote. And I just think as long as we put every bit of effort into getting this to the community as a whole, we'll be fine. And I don't know what we did last time, Bill. I think we just used the monitor and,
I think so, and Betty went and spoke to the school board after.
Well, that was
Yeah.
impressive.
And explained it, and there was publication of that. And the monitor, I think, spoke in
Yeah.
favor.
Does the monitor even have an editorial board we can sit down with?
I don't even know.
That's the problem.
well, back then, 10 years ago, the monitor was much,
Different.
well, it was a much wider spread, everybody
Right.
got the monitor. Now it's not so much, and the younger generation are all digital.
Well, and we always have CTV,
We do,
which gets a pretty good follow.
yeah.
So do we want to go for, since we're not going to be that long, for 7 PM next Monday instead of 6 PM?
All I'm saying is that I reserved the room.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why I was just asking these guys for a process, because I
Yeah.
know I have a kid event till 6.
7 it is.
7 works.
Let's come first.
It's what it's
7
been.
on Monday.
7, and in terms of what we'll see before that, if it's possible for Tracy to provide some suggestions and you to incorporate it, Jim, into the documents, and before that, you'll get the digital versions, then you could circulate it as part of the agenda for that meeting.
The only changes we're gonna see are proposed changes to the ballot questions.
Yeah.
So we really.
That's it.
So any redlining can be limited to that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
By when?
Ready, are we ready to do the non-public session?
Thursday, Friday?
Thursday, Friday.
Jim, are you going to send around the digital
Yeah.
version, to everybody?
Bill, will you send around?
I'll send this. Yes, I will definitely do that.
I can too.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
But I have a question. Isn't something about me taking something to the clerk? I don't mind, but I didn't know I was supposed to.
The same, similar process, we just want to file the final report with the school board by the 22nd. So we'll do the same thing. I'll have a cover letter, all that.
And I just make
And
sure he has it.
I carried it to the clerk.
I know you did.
Because he was right there.
Yeah, I'm weak.
Yeah,
He's my neighbor.
I just wanted to make sure. If I had a job, I wanted to do it. But
no.
if I can palm it off on Bill,
Yep.
I'll do that.
That, we'll have a cover letter for you to sign and the whole package, everything will be done Monday.
Thank you very much. Do we need to take any votes tonight? Or do we
Yes,
just have
actually,
understanding?
what I want is just authorization to approve the final revised version of the charter to forward to the state. I mean, that's a formal part of the process. I need your
The charter's
blessing.
not gonna change, so it's
Yeah.
it's only the ballot question.
I move that we authorize our attorney to submit that to the state as the final form of the charter we're proposing.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it and then answer
There's a
the question.
second. Is there any discussion?
We also need to actually approve the charter as amended.
Okay, we'll take the first vote first.
Well, I'm asking, do we
Yeah.
need to? Because we're authorizing him to submit it to the state.
Yeah,
Just make a friendly amendment and add that to the beginning. Approve the charter as amended and authorize
I move
me.
that we approve the charter as amended, and that we modify the motion to approve the charter as amended and to allow our attorney to submit that.
the
That's a
motion
good
has been
amendment.
amended and agreed to in a second. Is there any discussion? Thank you, no. Okay, is there any discussion? There is none. Those in favor will say aye, please.
Aye.
Are there any noes? There are not. And no abstentions. Those are the votes that need to be taken.
Yes.
Good work.
It is great work by this commission. We're nearing the end, and I really appreciate working with you guys.
It's great work, but the only thing is I look at it and I say, all that work for this?
No. I said, if we make a difference on campaign. Repaired, and if what we do, whether it's polite or not polite, I'm not
Gets
sure I care. I just want to get the job done.
Yep.
And if that happens, it's been worth
And
it.
we forget that the changes that we actually made are relatively minor. The number of things that we had to consider and decide what to do with are not.
That's right.
And to satisfy Eric's deadline that I get him a draft of an op-ed piece by the weekend, I did that. I sent it to Bill and Eric and to Tracy, and I'm
Well,
waiting
there
for-
may be time for an op-ed piece.
I'm waiting
as this
for
thing
Bill
develops.
and Tracy's comments on it, and we'll have to change it a little bit now.
Right.
because we have-
No, I think there's a little bit of advertising that needs to be done, and it probably could take the place of an op-ed, and I would look for people to volunteer to be part of that information seeking.
Well, I think
Through
that-
this whole process, I've kept in touch with Eileen O'Grady, and until recently, we've seen a lot of her, and we had some very good publicity from her early on. If we get to a point where we have something juicy, then I will be in touch with her again, and we can make sure that we, well, those are poor choice of words, but you get the idea.
My intent in the draft was that it will be over the names of everyone on the commission.
Yeah, we'll be proud to do it.
The one thing that you'll have to, when the draft is circulated to everybody, I mean, I can tell you, my expenditures and receipts were zero on both sides. I think the point I'm trying to make on that is, in the past, at least in this city, school board elections have not been expensive. You pay for the signs that you put up, and that's about it, maybe some brochures. But that may change, and that's the point we're trying to make.
When Warren Rudman ran for Senate, he spent $250,000. Today's race will be $40 million. That's what's happening.
Well, I quote, in the op-ed piece, I quote from John Stevens, who really was quoting for David Souter, in Citizens United. Nobody thought the problem with democracy was there wasn't enough money in elections, right?
I mean, Denver saw $1.8 million from their school board last year.
I spent $3 for white heavy paper to make my own signs, which I have always done. I made the sign very carefully and put it up at the orchard on Carter Hill Road. And the first night it was up, it rained. The thing got ruined. I lost my $3. And so I'm really in favor of campaign financing.
Did you report that $3?
I did.
Wait,
Yes,
Betty, you
Roger.
were-
And I put a few notes in for Roger so that he would
Wait.
appreciate it.
you were unopposed, like me.
Yeah, but you have to get your name out there. No, I wasn't unopposed. The large people.
No,
What are you challenging my memory?
It was Betty Clinton and I were running.
I don't.
You didn't see the ads that I ran trashing Nancy?
Yeah,
No, I missed those entirely. I don't get the paper. I
was
guess
rough.
I do, but
No, I do realize that 4 of the positions were unopposed. And I've never made a big deal of that. It's just the way it is. Okay, with that said, we need to move on to non-public session and that qualifies under RSA 91A32A. And at this point, we need to ask people who are not commission members to disappear.
Can you just take your vote and then we'll just...
Yes, and I would like a vote for us to go into non-public.
Executive session for the purpose of discussing a matter, personnel matter within RSA 91A3.
Second.
Takes a roll call vote.
That was Tom.
Bill?
Okay,
So Ardinger, aye.
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 Hi.
Okay.
Thank you for keeping us
Legal.
Yeah, that's the word I think we're looking for.
Okay.
Oh, he's got more work to do to take us out of this. He's gotta come out.